A Veterans Committee for the Hall of Fame could make this offseason very interesting in terms of who gets honored at Cooperstown.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. If your bet wins, you get $300 of bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. Find us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called these days, and on Instagram. I am your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. But the best way to get a hold of us is right here on the YouTube page. And use that hashtag EverydaySully. It helps us find your comments. Let's get right down to business here. Let's do the trivia question. Who are the only two pitchers to win the Rookie of the Year, Cy Young, and MVP in their career? And got a lot of interesting guesses here. Mike O'Hare said, let me trivia guess, Verlander and Clemens, maybe Denny McLain. Well, Denny McLain did win the Cy Young and the MVP, as did Clemens. You got one of them right, Verlander. Verlander won Rookie of the Year, the Cy Young, and the MVP in his career. Clemens didn't win Rookie of the Year, neither did Denny McLain. Sorry, I just hit my microphone. So there you go. This is another really good guess by Joshua Ankiel. I guess everyone seemed to know Verlander's one on that. Verlander and Dennis Eckersley. Phenomenal guess. Eckersley had a fine rookie season, and he later won the MVP and the Cy Young Award. But the answer is nope. File that under nope. Big John 08865 said Justin Verlander and Shohei Ohtani. Come on, Big John. When did Shohei Ohtani win the Cy Young Award? There you go. But you know what? It was my good friend out in Switzerland, Cubs fan with an 1908, got it right. He said, I'll take Verlander and add Don Newcomb. That's right. Don Newcomb, the great Dodger legend, not Hall of Famer, but the great Dodger legend, the late Dodger legend, won the Rookie of the Year, the MVP, and the Cy Young Award. And Verlander has won all those as well. Is Verlander's career over? We don't know, and neither do you. He didn't look like Verlander of old. And, it's funny. He's still a brand name as an ace because we don't really produce aces anymore. That doesn't seem to be the kind of pitcher people want to have anymore. They want to have someone who goes 5 innings and then goes right to the bullpen because aces are expensive. But, Yamamoto's an ace. We got a couple other aces. And there is a few aces that are going to be on a Hall of Fame ballot. The Veterans Committee, the Eras Committee for the Contemporary Baseball Era. There's one big ace that's going to be on that ballot, and that's Fernando Valenzuela, the late Fernando Valenzuela. Now, I've always looked at Valenzuela as one of those pitchers, and they had a bunch of them in the 1980s that were pitchers who had a phenomenal peak, who had a peak where they just dominated the game. Certainly Fernando did. And he was more than just that 1 year in 1981. He had several terrific years. At 86, he was terrific. He had a bunch of years where he was a Cy Young contender. And if you look at that era, there was a lot of pitchers who are not in the Hall of Fame who were aces for like a nice burst. Now, Dave Stieb is in that list. I think Dave Stieb actually belongs in the Hall of Fame, but I digress. You have pitchers like Brett Saberhagen, who won multiple Cy Young Awards, just didn't do it over the long haul. You had Dwight Gooden, who at his peak was the most dominant and electrifying pitcher in all of baseball. You had Oral Hershiser. You had Frankie Sweet Music Viola. You had Dave Stewart. You had Danny Jackson, who had a couple of years where he was Cy Young worthy and had some great years for some championship teams, just not over the long period of time. Jimmy Key is another pitcher who wound up doing that. He had that great burst. And, I think I'm missing one big one along the way. I'm doing some of this off the top of my head. But the 80s certainly had a lot of those pitchers who had those short dominant runs, but didn't have the long Hall of Fame career. Now, Valenzuela had a little bit more longevity in his career, and certainly in terms of the culture of the Los Angeles Dodgers, he was one of the most impactful players ever in Dodger history. I hate posthumous inclusions in the Hall of Fame because there's something about that is like Fernando didn't win 3 more games recently. His numbers have always been what they are. I think they fell short of the Hall of Fame. I think he had a wonderful career and was one of those players who was so impactful in Dodger history and was a huge part of picking up the game when it was in the midst of that horrible strike in 1981, the excitement that Valenzuela gave. And he's still one of the most, if you go to Dodger Stadium, you're still just filled with Valenzuela jerseys because of what he meant to people. In terms of his time when he was on the Hall of Fame ballot, he was only on for 2 years. In 2003, he got 6.2% of the vote. In 2004, he got 3.8% of the vote. I hate to say it, but I kind of agree with that. I mean, I would look at if he gets into the Hall of Fame on the Veterans Committee, I'm not going to have pitchforks and torches and burn down the dump. I just I'm not a big fan of posthumous, especially when you have many chances to put him in. Now, if you take a look at the current what will be on the regular Baseball Writers of America ballot, the new names on that list include like Cole Hamels and Ryan Braun, Howie Kendrick, Alex Gordon, Hunter Pence, Jason Kipnis, Matt Kemp. None of these players, all these players had fine careers. Rick Porcello had a fine career. Ryan Braun had a nice career, but none of those players are Hall of Famers. They should all just drop off immediately. No offense, they all have wonderful years. The players who are on the ballot who will probably get, I think, Carlos Beltran, who nearly got voted in last year, and Andrew Jones, I think those two are going to get in. And I think those are the only two that I think that are absolutely, locked. So you're going to have Andrew Jones and Carlos Beltran getting into the Hall of Fame next year. I'm gonna bet on that. A-Rod is also on that ballot. Obviously, as a player and what he achieved on the field, Alex Rodriguez is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's the greatest third baseman in New York Yankees history. There was a stretch of time he was the best player in baseball, but he's not in the Hall of Fame. And he has virtually no shot of getting to the Hall of Fame because of his PED conviction or suspension, I guess is the correct term for it. And I honestly don't think that's why he's not in. And I've made this point before, but this point is going to be blasted all over baseball. That is not to do with PEDs. It has to do with our thoughts of him and whether or not he was likable and people liked them or whatnot. And we're going to get a nice, big, huge look at that when we take a look at the fact that this year's ballot in the Veterans Committee could be a chance to either erase past mistakes, if that's your perception, or keep going a condemnation for another decade or so. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game or want to ride a hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets with the same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. So right now, FanDuel is giving customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. Now, let's get rid of that. I made a allusion that Fernando Valenzuela is on this new contemporary baseball era's ballot. And again, I don't think he's going to get in. Not that I don't think Fernando was great. Not that I don't think he was impactful. His numbers retired in Los Angeles, and he'll always be beloved. Some of the other names are on there. Jeff Kent, Dale Murphy, former guest of the show, Dale Murphy, Gary Sheffield, Carlos Delgado, Don Mattingly, Roger Clemens, and Barry Bonds. Okay, let's take some of the other names on there. If Dale Murphy, Fernando Valenzuela, and Don Mattingly get in, but Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds, and for that matter, Jeff Kent and Gary Sheffield, do not, then my point will 100% be made that the reason that Bonds, Clemens, and A-Rod are not in the Hall of Fame isn't steroids, isn't PEDs. It's because the voters didn't like them. Look, you're not going to find someone who loves the Red Sox more than me. I have my Red Sox cap here with the postseason logo from 2025. I've been rooting for I've been a Red Sox fan since the late 1970s. And, I'm objective. I'll criticize them when they do wrong. Lord knows I took them to task for dumping the likes of Betts and Bogarts and Devers. Before you defend Devers, gee whiz, I wonder if the Red Sox could have used Devers' bat against the Yankees. I digress. There's no more obvious PED user in the history of baseball than David Ortiz. And I love David Ortiz. I love him. He's fabulous. He's great for the game. He's in the Hall of Fame, and he should be. He's a Hall of Fame player, made a Hall of Fame impact, tied to PEDs. And I wrote about it back in 2009 on the old Sully baseball blog. I said, hang tight, Red Sox fans. We're going to find it out. Everything. The whole, he was an okay power hitter, would be, non-tendered by the Twins, suddenly becomes, bulks up and becomes a superstar, all-time slugger, has heart issues with his teeth, the spaces of the teeth getting one, his head getting bigger. I mean, everything, and then later was connected to dirty tests. He's in the Hall of Fame, as well he should be. Pudge Rodriguez is in the Hall of Fame. Pudge Rodriguez was tied to Balco, the same Balco that tied to McGuire, to Giambi, to Bonds, to Gary Sheffield. Pudge Rodriguez was tied in there as well. Pudge Rodriguez is in the Hall of Fame. People liked Pudge Rodriguez. He seemed like a personal, affable guy, and people enjoyed him. There are players in there that we know. There's some that are incredibly obvious in terms of, wow, you're a skinny player who suddenly hung out with this steroid user on the Padres and the Astros who suddenly ballooned up and became a Hall of Fame slugger. And his career ended just around the time they do testing. You know what I'm talking about. And there are plenty of players who we know have used PEDs who are in the Hall of Fame right now. So the sanctimonious points of view on PED users, I think you can put in the turlet. And if people want to say, well, it would be a shame to have them sitting next to Willie Mays, it'd be a shame to sit them next to Henry Aaron, it'd be a shame to them next to Frank Robinson and Stan Musial. Well, guess what? They're not going to. Everyone I just mentioned is, as of this recording, still dead. And the only way they'd sit next to Ted Williams is if they took his head out from the freezer and sat it down on a chair. And the chances of that happening, even though this world is banana boats these years, I don't think it's happening anytime soon. There was a period of time where the Hall of Fame had a log jam because no one would put any player's name on the ballot that were connected to PEDs. The protest vote was done by the Baseball Writers Association. And you know what? Fine. Congratulations. Pat yourself on the back. This is not the Pete Rose conversation. Don't even bring him up. Pete Rose, as I said before, didn't want to be in the Baseball Hall of Fame because the minute he would get in, he would no longer be relevant. And he wouldn't be able to cash in on his name anymore. So that's a whole different bag of tomatoes. And we're going to see now if he's going to get in based on the fact that his restrictions have been lifted. Cooperstown, the Hall of Fame, hates him. But I digress. If we're going to be talking about the Hall of Fame, including Andruw Jones and Carlos Beltran, again, two wonderful players who, if I had a ballot, I would vote for. Are either one of them as impactful as Bonds or Clemens? By the way, spoiler alert, the answer is no. Even before Bonds did his Dr. Bruce Banner impersonation, he was the best player in baseball. Before he ballooned up, the list of people who had hit 400 home runs and 400 stolen bases was Barry Bonds. End of list. Multiple MVPs. Was he sour? Did he get along poorly with the press? Did people not like him? Yeah. But you know what? There are lots of sour people in the Hall of Fame right now. Roger Clemens, before he bulked up with the Toronto Blue Jays and the Boston Red Sox, and he and Andy Pettitte started going back and forth across the country. Yeah, he was the best pitcher in baseball. And unlike Valenzuela, and unlike Dave Stewart and Frankie Sweet Music Viola, he had a prime that lasted a lot longer. He was still an elite pitcher in the mid-1990s before he bulked up. He was these are two impactful Hall of Fame players. And if we're saying the Hall of Fame is going to honor Andruw Jones and Carlos Beltran, but not Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, what are we doing? And while we're at it, Alex Rodriguez. Alex Rodriguez is a Hall of Famer. Period. End of sentence. As is Roger Clemens, as is Bonds. Is Kent? Is Sheffield? Sure. This should be one of the biggest classes of all time. You can make interesting cases for Delgado. I think Don Mattingly falls short. He had a fabulous peak, not long enough. But if they put him in, am I gonna burn down the place? Of course not. Dale Murphy, is it going to burn down the place? Of course not. Same way I didn't burn down the place when Harold Baines was put in there, who I don't think was a Hall of Famer. But when I went to Cooperstown, I saw his plaque. I said, there it is. That was the entire extent that putting Baines in the Hall of Fame affected my life. I was like, look at that. I don't necessarily think that Bill Mazeroski belongs in the Hall of Fame, but I saw his plaque. I said, look at that. If I don't agree with you, I walk to the next one, including David Ortiz's plaque, including Pudge Rodriguez's plaque, and Jeff Bagwell's plaque. And I said, look at that. 3 Hall of Famers, deservedly so. What are we doing here? The point has been made. The point's been made. Bonds last played in the major leagues and Clemens last played in the major league in 2007. We're approaching the 20th anniversary of that. 20th. It will be 9. If they get inducted, it will be 19th anniversary of their final playing in Major League Baseball. Now, for years, I've been saying the solution for Bonds. Have you seen the guy? He's in phenomenal shape. Have him come up as a pinch hitter once a year. Extend it. Keep extending it. Bonds and Clemens and A-Rod are all eventually going to be in baseball's Hall of Fame. Whether you like it or not, they're going to be. Do you know why? They had Hall of Fame careers. And eventually, the stuffy sports writers who wanted to make their message, you made your message. And eventually, and this is a spoiler alert, they'll all be dead. And the people who kick the can down the road, who will be the younger sports writers or the younger veterans, will put them in. Part of me thinks the best way to do it is in one big gulp. 7-Eleven this. Just put them all in. A-Rod, put in Bonds, put in Clemens, put everyone in at once. You want to make the argument for Sheffield? Sheffield had a great career. You want to make the argument, I think, Jeff Kent, sure. You want to put him in? Tremendous offensive second baseman for a long period of time. Have it be just a huge, huge crowd up there, like an Earth, Wind, and Fire concert. Just everyone all lined up, and say, you know what? You only got a 2-minute speech, and then boom, it's done. You don't have to worry about it again. The point's been made. They haven't been elected in the Hall of Fame normally. And for me, there you go. You've made the point. You've made it. You didn't have to sit Bonds next to Aaron and Frank Robinson and all of them. You didn't have to do that. Put him in the hall. If you don't agree with me, then you don't agree with me. I think, though, if you see it be Mattingly, Dale Murphy, and Fernando Valenzuela, then we just have to turn into the hall of people we liked. Nobody disliked Fernando. Nobody disliked Dale Murphy. No one disliked Don Mattingly. Hell, Dale Murphy was on this show as a guest. Couldn't have been a nicer human being. And that was his whole reputation. Incredibly charitable, good man. He was one of the SI Sportsman of the Year in 1987 when they gave it to the most charitable athletes, and he was one of them. He was also an elite player. He was an MVP caliber player for the Atlanta Braves then. But let's be honest here. Was he as impactful as Bonds or A-Rod? Look, I'm sure some of you are going to disagree with me. And that's, what am I going to do? I get it. And I can understand when you have players with multiple positives and everything that you look askance at their stats. But it's not like I could take the steroids that some of these players took and suddenly I would be Bonds or Clemens or Giambi or, Sosa and McGuire saved the game. They did. You may not like that, but they did. You may grind your teeth at that, but they did. I may grind my teeth at Avatar for a period of time, was the biggest moneymaker of all time. I didn't like the movie, but you know what? It did. And so sometimes you have to accept some things that aren't in your on your wish list. But the fact of the matter is, I think the solution to all this is have it be one big celebration, get it done, we move on. If you don't agree with me, let me know. I'm sure some of you are really not going to agree with me. But and I'm not even in those situations where if you disagree with me, I'll be like, yeah, you're full of it. I get it. I get the arguments against it. I'm just tired of them. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, you can get paid for being right. Don't miss on any excitement this sports season, whether you're following the NFL or NBA or both. There's no better time to jump into the action. If you haven't tried it yet, PrizePicks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least two player stats, and if you get them right, boom, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make up your lineup, and you can play anywhere PrizePicks operates, including here in California or in Texas or in Georgia. If you use PrizePicks during football Sundays and NFL tip-offs, you know what? It keeps every game more exciting. You want to pick players like Mahomes or Steph Curry, and you can see how your predictions play out. And the new stats feature is a game changer. You can now pick more on Steph's points, threes, and assists in the same lineup. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot saves the lineup from a loss. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. You know what it is? It's good to be right. One of the few pieces of baseball news that came out today, other than qualifying offers and stuff like that, is the new manager. And once again, I don't know how bad an interviewer was. How bad an interviewee was Albert Pujols, because he's been tied to a bunch of teams, including the Angels, including the San Diego Padres, and no one seems to want him. Now, there are a couple of managers who have been recycled. Shelton is now the manager of the Twins, and Schumacher is the new manager of the Texas Rangers. The Padres brought in Craig Stammon to be their new manager. He has been a pitcher for mainly with Washington and with San Diego. He had a nice career, mainly as he's a starter and mainly as a relief pitcher. pitched for some of those Washington teams that made the playoffs, was not part of the 2019 World Series champ, and has been part of the Padres organization, and he seems like a company man. Something happened with Mike Shildt. We don't know. Mike Shildt, who did a fine job managing the Cardinals, obviously won Manager of the Year, did a fine job managing San Diego. He decided to leave. He stepped down. Apparently clashed with the ownership. Seems to be a running theme with the San Diego Padres. There's something about them and ownership that doesn't seem to go well. So in comes company man Stammon with he's not had any managerial experience, but he is someone who has done several since he stopped playing, has had a couple of different roles in the organization. And the Padres are an interesting team. They're obviously a playoff team. They've lost Darvish for the entire season, and they're bringing in a super young, inexperienced manager who will probably gel with AJ Preller. Padres should have a sense of urgency, which is one reason why I'm surprised by this particular signing. I didn't think they were going to bring back Bruce Bochy, but I thought they were going to bring in a veteran manager because this is a team, they've never won the World Series. They've spent a ton of money on this team. They've done everything you would want a small market team to do, but they got to within 3 wins of the World Series in 2022, but haven't come close since. Now, the most frustrating thing for the Padres was in 2024, it looked like they had the Dodgers on the ropes. And if they beat the Dodgers and went on to face the Mets in the NLCS, they probably would have won that. And who knows what they would have done against the Yankees in the World Series. Last year, they played a do-or-die game, which they lost to the Chicago Cubs. How would they have done against the Milwaukee Brewers? I don't know, and neither do you. But they have themselves a MVP talent in Manny Machado. They have an interesting lineup. They have an interesting team. And they always seem to be able to retool pretty quickly. But they haven't won the pennant or a World Series yet. And to justify some of the big, huge honking contracts, especially the one for Manny Machado, they have to do just that. And they have turned San Diego into a baseball-crazed city. They draw well. It's the only major league team there now since they lost both the Clippers and the Chargers to Los Angeles. And so they have to do something. And we'll see. I've been wrong about managers before. I was not for the Snitker signing or hiring for Atlanta, and he wound up taking him to the promised land. Yost was someone I didn't like for the Royals, and he wound up taking him to the promised land. And I've been screaming for Schneider's head, and he got them millimeters from a World Series championship. So maybe Stammon is the one to lead the Padres to their first World Series title since the Gary Coleman made-for-TV movie, The Kid from Left Field. But there has to be a sense of urgency right now with San Diego because they're a big spending team and are a harbinger of hope for those small market teams who say, oh, we can't do this, we can't do this. The Padres have images of winning it all dancing in their head. And will it be Craig Stammon? I don't know. I didn't expect it to be Dave Martinez in Washington, but here we are. So we'll see. We'll see. It's too early to make any determination. It just was a signing that somewhat surprised me and makes me wonder, geez, how badly is Albert Pujols blowing these interviews? Hey, let's go to the trivia question, shall we? Trivia question is, who is the only pitcher to earn a victory in all 4 Canadian Major League Baseball stadiums? This pitcher earned a victory in all 4 stadiums that were home for a Canadian Major League team. Those stadiums are Parc Jarry in Montreal, Stade Olympique in Montreal, Exhibition Stadium in Toronto, and Skydome/Rogers Center in Toronto. Only one pitcher earned a victory in all 4 of those spots. That's a trivia question. put it right down here below. Talking about a Hall of Fame ballot that could bring in some legends with a little bit of clout over them to Cooperstown or keep them out longer, and a surprising managerial hire in San Diego. This has been Locked On MLB. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.